Welcome to the Joe Thomas Substack Live. Thank you so much for joining me. Um, just as people come in, hi Mulaney, nice to see you. Seawolf, thanks for joining. Thank you so much for joining. Paula, it's good to see you again. Thank you for joining. Um, I wanted to talk about a few things today, and a couple of those things were one of the things I wanted to discuss was that the JD Vance post that came out today. I thought I'd just talk about that off the bat because it was one of the things that sort of I noticed first this morning. Hi, Alex. Alex, nice to see you again. Um, and basically, what it was is, hi, Lisa. Good to see you. Um, basically, let me just double check, make sure that sound that it's there. Is that JD Vance basically said in his post, um, JD, if the media you consume told you that Donald Trump was on his deathbed, he didn't do a press conference for because he didn't do a press conference for 3 days. Imagine what else they're lying to you about. Hi, Alex. Let's see it. Now, this was like this post, like Twitter post by JD Vance, basically saying that that people were speculating about what happened to Donald Trump because he hadn't been seen for like 4 or 5 days or 7 days, right? And he tried to make it out like, well, if the media is lying to you about that because he came back and he did a conference and all that, what else are they lying to you about? Which was hilarious because when it comes to MAGA, just about every accusation is a confession. Um, First of all, the people who were speculating about what was happening to Trump over those 3, 4 days wasn't the New York Times, it wasn't the Washington Post, it wasn't CNN or any of the news organizations. It was just influencers online or average people either doing funny memes or going like, Where is he?" You know what I mean? So thanks for the love hearts. So it wasn't this, like the way JD Vance tries to make it out, right, is that if you're consuming, if the media you're consuming, what is he saying by using the word media? He's trying to make this out to be CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, Politico, and all these things. He's trying to conflate the two different things. But what we know, hi Bob, nice to see you again. Hi Marnie, good to see you again, Marnie. So basically, just so you know, is I'm just talking about the JD Vance. Hi Denise, I'm just talking about JD Vance, what he said on the post, basically saying that that the media lied to you about Donald Trump being sick over the last 3 or 4 days. Hi, Money. So again, it's just so much lies coming from JD Vance and Trump that he can just do that, right? The other thing is people people doing hi Denise, people doing lies, like people like online or whatever, chatting about chatting about what's happened to Donald Trump. He hasn't been gone for 3 4 days. That's perfectly normal, right? Like you can't go after average people online or influencers or something like that who aren't part of the news who are going, okay, how come Donald Trump hasn't appeared? Now, what I kept doing through that 3 or 4 days where there was speculation about what happened to Donald Trump is I kept reading the New York Times, CNN, Washington Post, and not one of them ever commented on anything like he was at Walter Reed. They never speculated that. There wasn't any speculation. The only coverage they gave of it, which was very small, was towards the end, saying a lot of people online are saying this. They weren't saying it themselves. They were just commenting on online people making speculation. So JD Vance, by JD Vance posting this out, which went viral, if the media you consumed told you that Donald Trump was on his deathbed because he didn't do a press conference for 3 days, imagine what else they're lying to you about. Well, like if that's the case, let's talk about MAGA media. And when I'm talking about MAGA media, unlike JD Vance, in this particular case, I'm not going to be talking about just online influencers or some random people on Twitter. I mean, you can't if that I'm talking about Fox News, mainstream media. I'm talking about Newsmax. I'm talking about OAN, right? When in 2021, so years, like when Joe Biden was president, right? Years before we sort of saw that sort of the health issues and all that sort of stuff in his last year, they weren't just saying he's sick or getting old. they said that he was on his deathbed in 2021, right? So deathbed generally means you've got a couple of days to live, a couple of weeks, right? But with Joe Biden, so a lot of those people, the speculation again wasn't, I'm not talking about some online person. I'm talking about mainstream media. On the MAGA side, Biden was never as bad as Trump is. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, the thing I'd say, Bob, the other thing that that Biden never did is he never threatened Greenland with military action if they didn't give up their land. Now, Bob, could you imagine, right? If Joe Biden came out one day and said, "Look, we want Greenland, and we're not going to rule out military action if they don't give it to us." Like that, if Joe Biden had said that, that would have been like all over the news. He's losing his mind. He's got to be taken away. But the thing about Joe Biden was, yes, I believe he was too old to run a second term, but nothing he said or did was ever like, "Oh my God, I can't believe Dave hanging. Yeah. I can't believe that, Joe Biden is trying to bring in all these crazy tariffs. I can't believe Joe Biden is sending people after to El Salvador. I can't believe Joe Biden is threatening Greenland and he wants to annex Canada." Like, they are just insane. Hi, Natasha. Nice to see you again. Hi, Diane. That is just insane. So the comparison between Biden, right, and Trump, their health, right? Even though, I'll keep saying it, I think I'm one of those people who thought Joe Biden shouldn't have gone for a second term. So I agree with that. But the other thing is Joe Biden didn't go for a second term eventually. He eventually did step aside for Kamala Harris. With Trump, there is no stepping aside. He's not moving aside. Golf with Biden. That's right. Yeah. So again, the two things are completely different, right? On the one, and so JD Vance saying this is so crazy on so many levels. The other thing is that all the lies that they said about Biden going back to 2021, that he was on his deathbed and all that, Laura Loomer, who is a good friend of Donald Trump and almost like a media advisor to him, and she has a big platform online on Twitter, right? And she's kind of like the Rasputin of the MAGA world, right? She's like into all these weird stuff, and she gives him advice on using ivermectin and all this sort of stuff. She wrote a breaking news story, right? I think it was Where's Jack Tapper's book about Trump's people covering for his health. That's right. That money, that's never going to happen. That's never going to happen from Jake Tapper. But again, it's just, Laura Loomer wrote this post saying, and whenever Laura Loomer writes a post, it always starts with, "I have it on inside information," right? So she tries to pretend like she has inside information. Now, why would anybody in the Biden family or world ever give Laura Loomer inside information, right? That is just so, she's not a journalist, right? She's just an online influencer who has a lot of influence because she has the ear of Donald Trump. But she never, so I love it. It always makes me laugh when I hear Laura Loomer go, "I have it on inside information." Sure, Laura. Yeah, sure you do. Of course you do. And so they basically, she came up with a story early last year that Joe Biden was literally on his deathbed, right? And then when we find out this year, right, mid this year, right, that he had like cancer, right? She was like, "I was right." No, you weren't right. If you do a story in February 2024 and he's still alive in September of 2025, you weren't right. A deathbed is where you don't survive a deathbed for a year and a half or 2 years. The other thing I find hilarious about these people is eventually Joe Biden will die, right? All human beings die, and Joe Biden is pretty sick. So who knows, right? Hopefully he can survive a long time, right? But this is the craziness of the MAGA movement. The people who were saying that Joe Biden was on his deathbed last year, or were saying that he was going to die 2 years ago, 3 years ago, if Joe Biden dies 2 years from now, they will say, "I was right." I mean, Joe Biden, basically, I think that Joe Biden in a couple of years will be like 85 years old. Now, he's already lived past the average age for a man in America, right? Biden still looks very healthy. Yeah, he does. He looks physically healthier than Trump, that's for sure. So they're going to take credit for Joe Biden dying. The only way that they won't take credit for Joe Biden dying from saying something they said 3-4 years ago, is if he never dies. He could die, he could live until he's 100 years old, and if he dies on his 100th year, Laura Loomer goes, I told you he was sick. That is how crazy these people are. They will go, I was right. In 2024, I told you that Joe Biden was on his deathbed, and here we are. 20 years later, and he did die. So again, the other thing was, of course, Hillary Clinton. Do you remember back in 2016 with Hillary Clinton? And she, there's a video of her where she kind of just wobbles for 2 seconds, and then suddenly she had Parkinson's disease. The Trump started running 24/7 ads, right, with her showing her stumbling, going, what's wrong with her health? She's got, and then Fox News, right? Again, I'm not talking about people online on Twitter, which is what JD Vance is talking about. I'm not talking about, some people making memes and all that sort of stuff. People do that on both sides, right? I'm talking about actual mainstream journalists. Mainstream journalists on the MAGA side, I call them MAGA media, right? Fox News, Newsmax, OAN, the New York Post as well, were running stories that possibility that Hillary Clinton, right, had Parkinson's disease. And the only evidence they had was a video of her, right, moving like this for 2 seconds, right? This is the insanity of what JD Vance says, right? Every single accusation when it comes to MAGA is a confession. Every single accusation is confession, right? If he says, this is my favorite bit, right? He says, this is what JD Vance posted towards the end, right? If the media you consume told you that Donald Trump was on his deathbed because he didn't do a press conference for 3 days, this last bit, imagine what else they're lying to you about, right? That's a great point, JD Vance, because in 2016, right, they were lying about Hillary Clinton, right, having Parkinson's disease, and then in 2020, Fox News and Newsmax and OAN were lying to us about January 6th being stolen, about Dominion machines being hacked, right? And Fox News was lying so much about it that they got sued for $800 million from Dominion lawsuits, right? So in that regards, I actually agree with JD Vance. If Fox News is going to lie to you about Dominion lawsuits being stolen, if they're going to lie to you about Barack Obama not being born in America, right? If they're going to lie to you about they're eating cats and dogs, if they're going to lie to you, if they're going to basically show you an edited video, right? This is like last year in 2024, Donald Trump did an interview on Fox News with Brett Baer and one other person from Fox News, and they asked him a whole bunch of questions. First of all, they said, if you get elected, will you release the MLK files? And Trump said, yes. If you get elected, the next question, if you get elected, will you release the JFK files? Yes. Next question, will you release the Epstein files? Then Trump suddenly goes, probably less so with that one. There's a lot of phony accusations in there. And then what Fox News did is they edited out all the bits where he was umming and hahing, right? And they only left in the bit where he said yes. Now, it wasn't until it was leaked later that they actually did it. Bob Vance didn't hesitate to say that he's ready to take over if something should happen. Yeah. And that was funny because a few days before he went missing, and I'm not into the whole conspiracy thing, but a few days we went missing, Vance went on TV and he said, I'm ready to take over, right? There's no doubt that Trump is not in good health. I'm even hearing that from his biggest supporters online, that he's not in good health, right? So they're not even trying to deny it. Now, whether he's going to die tomorrow or next year or year, I have no idea. I'm not going to make that act. I have no idea because I know I've met friends of mine's parents who are like his age, his health, his McDonald's, and they take 20 pills a day and they still live. So I don't know. He's going to have health issues at that age. He's obese, right? And he's got cankles, and he doesn't sleep very much, and so he's not the healthiest person. And eventually, that stuff catches up here. Now, he could easily live the whole term. I'm not going to be one of those speculators. I have no idea. But if you're going to speculate against Joe Biden, right? And you're going to speculate specifically about Hillary Clinton was just that was so bad because there was the Hillary Clinton. There was just no reality to it again. I never really laughed about this shit, and yet that 20 pills a day and they're still living made me laugh because it is so true. Yeah, yeah. I agree, Jamie. There's the amount of people my parents were a little bit healthier, but some of my friends' parents, in their 70s and 80s and a little bit older, they are on a lot of pills. I remember going to like a family thing a couple of weeks ago, and it was my friend's parents who they own this like really nice place, and yeah, and they were basically and woke up in the morning and there was the dad who is probably younger than Trump, but he's about the same size, right? He's about the same size as Trump, right? And he's got cankles as well, by the way, and he's got like the other thing is like when we had dinner the night before. All they talk about is health issues, right? It's like, oh yeah, like this and that. This is going on, of course, because when you're that age, it's very, very, yeah. So I totally do understand. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I totally understand that. Yeah, I totally get how people that age can have problems, but they can live a long time. These days, people can live a long time just taking pills or whatever. And Trump would be getting the best medical care in the world at Walter Reed. Well, it's very prominent when you're that age and don't know if we'll make it. I don't know if I want to make it. Yeah, I agree. Like sometimes like I see people like my friend's dad. He's still living a good life, right? Even on the pills, right? But sometimes I see people hunched over, right? And they're literally like hunched to the side. They can't go straight up. They're really bad and they're living in a nursing home. All their friends have passed away. And for me, if I got to that stage, I, I don't know. I don't know if that's a quality of life I would want for myself, but everyone's different, right? But what we do know about Trump is that he's not going to be getting any better. You can't reverse aging, not to that limit, right? He's only going to get how bad he is now is going to get worse next year, and it's going to get worse the next year, and it's going to get the worse next year. The amount of times I see people in that age group, right, where you don't see them for a year, and then you see them, and you're like, whoa, it's quite startling, right? Hi, Dave from California. It's good to see you again. So basically, I don't know what's going on with his health. It's obviously not good. Even MAGA says it's not good. But if JD Vance is going to come out and speculate about, that the media is lying to you about this, well, he can't provide any evidence that any of the media, right? Any of the media was speculating about him being at Walter Reed or anything like that in terms of mainstream media. So again, it's just not true. And they should really they should, JD Vance gets away with it because they live in like these little bubbles and stuff like that. Jamie, not when you suck down the pop and absorb the burgers and you think negative. Yeah, that would be Trump in a nutshell. Vance is just a ding dong. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I agree. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I always go back and forwards between, years of eating McDonald's finally catching up with him. Yeah. I mean, it's funny, like he hires RFK Kennedy, RFK Jr., right, as his like Maha person, right, for the thing. And one of the first pictures that you see, right, one of the first pictures you see them is them on a plane eating McDonald's together. All of them eating McDonald's together, right? So, and the idea that RFK Jr., a lot of people in the online space, especially young dudes, they look at someone like RFK Jr. and they see that he's got muscles and they just assume that that's healthy. Now, I'm not saying, of course, going to the gym and working out and doing weights is a very good thing for everybody, right? But not if you're taking steroids, right? And he's admitted to taking steroids. He's admitted to taking hormones. He's admitted to like being on heroin. He drinks raw milk, right? All this sort of stuff. He doesn't believe in vaccines. He had a brain worm for a while. Whether that brain worm is still in there, faked his death, we don't know. But at the end of the day, he's not the health person that Trump and his administration try to make him out to be. Well, RFK thinks he can read faces now. Think about this. Look at the face. We can read about that. I don't know if he should not be. Yeah. I don't know. He should just. Yeah, I agree. Like when he said, still there. Yeah. When he said, when 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 RFK Jr. said, "I can look at children," right? So, I mean, sorry, as an Australian, when I hear this stuff, right, I always think I always think, what would happen if one of my politicians in my country said the shit that Trump says or RFK Jr. says? They would be crucified. They would lose their job like within a day, right? But it's just like it's been so normalized. Yes, when he said that, I thought, what? So, yeah, he says, oh, like he's basically saying, look, um, I can look. So he was talking about going through an airport, and he'd look at a kid, which is strange. And then he'd look at a child and he'd be able to see sort of like sicknesses in that child. Now, this is from a lawyer. Like he's a trained lawyer. He's not a physician, right? And he has no medical degree. What I love about RFK Jr., or maybe not love, is how he says you can't trust the science, right? And you can't trust what the experts tell you. But he never ever tells you who you should trust, right? He only tells you who you shouldn't trust. But the reason he doesn't want to tell you who you should trust is because if he actually named the people you should trust, it would be some lawyers or people with no medical degrees or maybe a nurse. Nothing wrong with nurses, but Florida is now making vaccines mandatory for school children. What could go wrong? Not mandatory. Yeah, exactly. Right, that's a good point. They're kind of like that. It's the negative and it sways everything. Yeah. It's like RFK Jr. Like, yeah, RFK Jr. gives like I wrote something the other day on Substack, right? And I wrote something like, if you've ever walked past, a hippie before, like if you're in like we have a place in Australia called Byron Bay. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's like it's on the beach. It's kind of like, there's like reality TV shows about it in America. And it used to be a bohemian area right on the beach. And it used to be surfers and hippies and all that sort of stuff. That's what it was. It's been gentrified now. So it's really expensive to live there. But that's kind of like what became trendy and became fashionable, which because it was like had that alternative lifestyle, right? And so I used to go there quite a bit, and I used to like that. And look, occasionally back then in my time, I smoked a little bit of pot here and there, right? So I'll admit it. Now I would walk down the main street of Byron Bay, and you would have these guitarists, like hippie type guitarists, right? And they would be playing the guitar, and next to them would be like a cardboard a cardboard sign. And on that cardboard sign, they'd have written on there something like, you know what? Um, um, 4G causes cancer. So 4G causes cancer. Vaccines cause cancer. Yep. Sorry, vaccines cause autism. And, you must drink raw milk and all this sort of stuff. Like, so there's all these like health things, right, that they're claiming on this cardboard box. But hi, Kimmy. Nice to see you again, Kimmy. Yeah. And what I'd noticed is that all these like hippie type people who had all these concerns about health on their cardboard box, they were all chain smoking the whole day, right? So you'd walk past them, they'd have one cigarette in the morning, and they'd basically use that cigarette to light the next cigarette. So they didn't even need like a lighter to start a new cigarette. It was like they'd smoke one and then use that one. It was just one after each other. So I just feel like, yeah, if you're going to give advice on health, right, on your cardboard box, you shouldn't be like chain smoking 100 cigarettes a day. And I always found that sort of contradiction. The other thing is, of course, is they're like, a lot of them will take drugs and hey, look, I'm not against any of the stuff that I'm talking about. I used to smoke cigarettes. I smoked pot. I occasionally took recreational drugs. So I'm not against any of this stuff, right? But I would never, right? But my issue is that those people, and by the way, I just want to say this because I did get a little bit of backlash, right? I did get a bit of backlash from hippies on Substack saying, I'm not actually I'm a hippie and I don't think like that. So the reason I used the word hippie is because I thought it was funnier and I thought it would conjure up the picture of like a hippie. I did think about not saying hippie and just saying street performer. but it didn't feel as funny for me. Yeah. So again, I apologize if there's any hippies out there who don't think like that. Yeah. This is an Australian hippie, right? Um, but again, I do know there are some hippies, maybe not hippies, but like that type of people in California and places like that who don't necessarily believe in vaccines, right? And you're not offended. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. This is in Australia, yeah, exactly. And by the way, Jamie, you wrote hippie with a Y, and I believe that's more of an English, Australian, British way of saying hippie. And in America, you write hippie with an IE. I think I don't know. That's what someone told me. They said you spelled hippie wrong. You spelled damn it, you spelled hippie wrong. And I said no, that's how we spell it in Australia. So, but you can spell it either way. I'm talking to my phone. It's going to spell things like crazy. Oh, right, yeah. Maybe your phone is like because you're talking to an Aussie, it's taken over. But yeah, hippie, Alex, yeah. But I wrote Y. So when I said it, I wrote HIPPY. That's how we say it in Australia. Um, but yeah, like I think there's a lot of I think so basically so basically that's what I was trying to say. Like I was just basically saying that that person who I walked past in Byron Bay, right? That hippie, that person, right, is now the health secretary of the United States. So that was the point that I was trying to make by that Substack article is saying that someone who has those views about chemtrails or or vaccines cause vaccines or 4G causes cancer, right? Which is in Australia is quite prominent in that alternative industry, right? That person who holds those views, which is identical to what, similar to what um, RFK holds, is now literally the health secretary. And the thing is, I have no problems with those hippies in Byron Bay. I would sit there and I would, I sit there and watch them and hung out with them and, had a joint, I had fun, but I wouldn't want them to be the health secretary of Australia. Do you know what I mean? You can like someone, you can like, hi, Kev, you can like someone, right? And you can find them funny because they think like funny things. But at the same time, you can say, I wouldn't want you to be the health secretary. Like with Trump, Jamie, I know that's just crazy. He's simply not healthy. He has ideas. I'm not sure he has solutions. I find it fascinating. This is a family spoke out so hard again. Yeah. 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 So, yeah, that's so true. It is so true. Yeah. He's crazy. And I think the fact that he's being taken seriously as this health secretary is an alarming thing to me because um, America, in a lot of ways, um, is quite dominant in the health industry, right? So what worries me is that he's going to create a culture where um, evidence-based things doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter if something is peer reviewed, right? And not only is RFK going to create a culture um, where peer reviewed studies and scientific analysis is a good thing, he's going to create it where anything that is peer reviewed or well studied is actually bad. So he's not even saying that peer review because peer reviewed studies is like he's saying like basically trust the science, right? He's he's basing his analysis on not scientific, nothing scientific, right? Um, yeah. And I totally get nobody will trust America when it comes to health. Yeah, I agree, Bob, exactly. Because I think, you know, as an Australian, and I know this is the same in Europe, when we used to look at America for science, you guys, he's just going to kill so many of us, Joe. Yeah, Kimmy. He's just like he's creating this it's like he's taking America, right? And to some degree, this is the important thing that I think a lot of us Americans should know. Um, a lot of what happens in America, and I think you'll probably be surprised, or maybe you won't be, Australia absorbs a lot of news from America. And because a lot of people are online, right? a lot of people in Australia are on Twitter. They follow Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan has a massive audience in Australia. They're following all these people. We get an additional pandemic. Yeah. So we're getting a lot of this coming. So, so this information is getting brought to Australia, the United Kingdom, and Europe, and it doesn't work as well in these countries, but it does work to some degree. The amount of young guys who I'm talking about guys in like their 20s or late teens and that who have become like Joe Rogan or RFK Jr. fans who do, hi Joe, hi Rob. See, RFK Jr. literally said we have to stop following the experts because that we're not a feature of democracy, but religion like Trump. He has exactly the opposite. Yeah. Young guys really like Rogan. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly, Rob and Jamie. Yeah. And the thing is that young people, right, even though people like Joe Rogan are sort of calling out people like Trump about other stuff, Marnie, I think we're going to lose a lot of great scientists and researchers. Yeah. I think a lot of these people, like even Joe Rogan at the moment, is calling out Trump for a lot of other stuff, but he hasn't changed his views on science and evidence, right? So we're still getting a lot. We're still getting a lot of people in that manosphere world with Joe Rogan who are still very anti-vax, right? Very anti-vax and very thing. So, and they look at RFK Jr. as anti-establishment. And this whole anti-establishment thing is such a toxic thing because, I totally understand, right, how some people can go, you know what, I don't like the establishment. On the surface, right, that seems like a good thing. You don't want to be establishment and things like that. But, my favorite saying, which I have posted on my Substack account, is a Carl Sagan saying, right? And Carl Sagan said, it pays to have an open mind, but not so open your brains fall out. And I feel like the RFK and the Joe Rogan world and the MAGA world have gone from healthy skepticism, which we should all have, right? Have an open mind, to your brains have fallen out. And that's what I think has happened with their movement. They've basically gone from, yeah, we should be a little bit skeptical about that. We should ask questions to, right? If I have 100, like with Joe Rogan or that group, if they have 100 experts all saying, right, that all saying, establishment doesn't have to be always bad. Exactly. Flu and COVID are going to kill. Yeah. Yeah, exactly, Rob. And basically what they're saying, like Joe Rogan, is if you have 100 experts saying you've got a mole on your skin and you should get, and 99% of them say you should remove that mole, right? For people like that, but there's one quack, right, who says, don't remove it, put some ivermectin on there. Just rub a little bit of ivermectin and just put it on that and it's gone. Ivermectin cures everything, right? So don't worry about cutting it out, right? So basically that's what they're thinking. They're like, and what the interesting thing about it is a lot of time people in that, like there's another guy called Lex Freeman, they're all in the same world. And during COVID, they would call out experts for being arrogant. They would say experts are arrogant because they think they know everything. Right. So let's look at that. Let's look at what they say, that experts are arrogant because they think they know everything. Because this is kind of the thing that happens in that world, the RFK world, the MAGA world, is that if you're an expert, you're arrogant, you think you know everything, Fauci and all that sort of stuff, right? And so therefore they go against them. Now, what I actually think is more arrogant than an expert, right, is someone like Joe Rogan, who said that he left school at the age of 10, which is fine, like 15 or something, right? Never finished school, has no science degree, right? Has no evidence-based degree at all. He's an ex-B Factor guy. He's an MMA guy who used to get hit in the head for a living, right? He's a comedian and a podcaster, right? So this particular person who's saying that the experts think they're experts, he knows so much, right? He's so arrogant that he will choose the 0.5% of experts over the 99% of experts. Now, to me, that's arrogant, right? Arrogance is saying, I know so much, right, that I will ignore 99.9% of science and I'll go with 0.1, because that's arrogant, because you're saying that you know more than 99% of it. Yet they are saying that the arrogant ones are the actual experts who are backed up by 99% of other people. Now, it's important to remember that when people do peer-reviewed science, right, peer-reviewed means that other experts will come in and look at their work and go, I like that, I don't like that. I think you're wrong in there, I think you're right there, right? So they are being reviewed. In the mind of a lot of these people, they think a scientist comes up with, to me, that's arrogant with double dose of stupid. Yeah, exactly, Rob. Yeah. That's the thing that always blew my mind with this arrogant thing. If you're a comedian, right, or you're a podcaster, and you're choosing the 0.1% and ignore it, you're the arrogant one, not the scientist, because the scientist actually has spent decades studying this. You haven't. You're just a contrarian, right, who's so brain rotten with anti-establishment, right, because your brain got, because 9/11, your conspiracies and all that sort of stuff, right, and so brain rotten that now you believe a lawyer, right, a nurse, right, some random person on the internet over an actual expert. But this is the thing. This is the thing for me, the key thing, right? Yeah, it's just like Rogan trying to profess things. Yeah, this contrarianism, right, is, I think, a real big part of the problem in the United States, right? And it's probably around the world, where and this is how Trump, to some degree, won the election. He ran as an outsider, right? Yeah, exactly, Alex. Not, yeah. It's like you don't. It's like in this day and age in America, you get rewarded for being an idiot, right? You get rewarded for being stupid, right? And if you're intelligent, right, or you have a degree, or when you speak, right? Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Or if you speak, if you can talk well and speak well, that sort of stuff, and and you're intelligent and all that, that works against you these days, right? You're considered an insider. You're considered boring. You're considered part of the establishment, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, Kimmy, outsiders on the inside. Kimmy, I wish you could do more live stuff like this, Joe. We love you. Oh, thank you, Kimmy. I love it. Just so everyone knows, before I move on to the next thing, is this Friday, your time. I think it's 10 a.m. your time. I think it is 10 a.m. your time. You can see on my Substack account. I'm actually going to be talking to Alyssa Cass. She's a Democrat, and a guy called Pat, who's a Republican, and they're with a national popular vote interstate compact, and they want to change the electoral college vote, so the popular vote wins, right? They want to change the electoral college. So basically, no longer the electoral college like we have at the moment. It will be the popular vote. So if you're interested in having more the popular vote win the election, watch my interview with them on Friday. I think 10 a.m. anyway, that time. The only thing with that is I'm going to be talking at midnight. So it's 10 a.m. I think their time, midnight for my time. So, if I'm looking a little bit stoned, like red eye, it's not. It's like midnight. Yeah, Trump needs to keep his base stupid. So anyway, we'll move on from that. But yeah, again, I think a lot of this most voters should always win elections. I dream of that day. Yeah, exactly. Well, Marnie, Alex, Kimmy, come and listen. Come and listen to the podcast. And the other thing about the podcast is, I told them that I want people to ask questions and comment on the Substack Live that I'm having with these people, right? And so I want to get you guys involved. So if you've got any questions or anything, like jump in, ask. I will like pass it on to them. Yeah, thanks, Alex. Thanks, Kimmy. So yeah, so I think I am really concerned about this anti-intellectualism, because I'm starting to see it in Australia amongst younger people, right? I'm really starting to see a much younger people in Australia, and and it's concerning because I think so many people live online now, and so many people when you're young, right? It's maybe more so when you're a guy than a girl. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I think it is more guys than girls because I think generally guys when they're young, they're a little bit more stupid. And I'm saying that as a man, right? As a man, I think we're a little bit more stupid when we're young than women are, right? And I think I think they look at Trump and MAGA and they see an outsider. And when you're a young guy, right, a teenager or whatever, you like to be seen as the rebel, right? You like to be seen as the outsider. You don't want to be seen as the establishment, right? And that's why last year Trump picked up a lot of 18 to 29-year-olds. The most that any Republican Party I think has ever picked up, right? In that age group. So there's no doubt about it. Trump was going on all these podcasts. He went on Joe Rogan, but he didn't just go on Joe Rogan. He went on like about 8 or 9 different podcasts, right? So he picked up a lot of those anti-establishment people who 1960s Chinese Cultural Revolution. That's right. Yeah, Bob. Unfortunately, AI is going to go into produce a lot of stupid people. Yeah, yeah, because you don't have to think about things anymore yourself. You don't have to you don't have to have critical thinking skills to some degree with AI. But yeah, I think a lot of guys do go on vibes, like Rob said. It is a vibe thing. So much of the election now is vibe because so much of so many of people who follow politics in America and maybe to a lesser degree Australia, they're not they're not they're not thinking about they're not thinking about policy. They're not going, oh, who's better for housing? Who's better for rents? Who's better for? They're thinking about culture wars, right? They're obsessed with the culture wars, right? And they in their opinion, they see like comedians like Joe Rogan, all those people, they can joke around with anything. According to polls, most of the young men people, yeah, they turn against it. I was about to talk about that, Rob. Yeah, you're right. Um, a lot of these people, right? They went for Trump because it was basically it was a vibe thing. It was a vibe thing, Oh man, he's like Trump, like he jokes like a comedian. The left is too like prim and proper. They're too like straight and all that stuff, right? And like on the face of it, you could actually see how they believe that, right? You can see like you got Kamala Harris, who how could anyone look at Trump and say, "Oh, yeah, that's the real man"? Yeah, exactly. Well, also he wears a lot of makeup. I always find it hilarious that Donald Trump got all that manosphere. The guys who want to go, the Andrew Tates and the the people who go that you can't be a real man anymore. We want to bring real men. This was the whole Trump thing with young men. Like, let's bring back real men. Let men be men. And then Donald Trump gets up every morning and packs on more makeup than a drag queen. Like how is this but yeah, it's such a it really is just like such a vibe thing these days, right? It is and it's insane. And it's sad in a way, but also, the Democrats are doing well. Now, you also like said before, someone said before, is that there's nothing manly about Trump. He's grotesque, makeup, girly, buffet, hairspray. Yeah, exactly. Like Trump's like the least manly man in the world, and he wears makeup a lot everywhere. He comes from like socialite New York City, right? He's a socialite New York City guy, but to the MAGA base, it's like in their head they're imagining him living in like, I don't know, Alabama, like Mississippi or something, like some red state, down the Texas, he's a cowboy in Texas. Like that's how I think they imagine him, not as some socialite from New York who's never had a real job in his life, who's surrounded by gold, right? Who got out of going to jail. He got out, got out of going to not jail, got out of going to war, right? Because bone spurs. This guy would never ever associate with his own base at all. Trump has more in common with Hollywood liberals, right, than he does with the MAGA base. That's just true. He has more. He would rather hang out with a Hollywood liberal who hates him than he would his own base like if he had to spend 3 days with one of them, right? You know, so yeah, nobody despises the MAGA base more than Trump and MAGA media. That is 100. I am 100% convinced about that. Yeah, um, I'm not sure that Trump has ever bought his own groceries. I always tell people that last year Trump would not even buy you a chicken. Yeah, thinks groceries in some when he thinks his base is stupid. Yeah, and look, Bob, he's right. His base is stupid. So so yeah. But Marty, he talks like an American redneck without the accent, and I'm a white Southern woman. He has accent, but thinks very progressives was born in the wrong part. Yeah, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, Marty. Yes, ma'am. See, that was my American accent. Um, Rob C. He hopes his base is more stupid than he is, but he's wrong. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think his base, right? I think his base, like it, if in years from now, right, there are going to be like historians and psychologists who are going to want to like study the brains of the MAGA base and to find out a great American accent. Thank you. I know it's perfect. It's perfect. Yeah. I I think it's actually really hard to do an Aussie accent. I rarely ever see an American do a good Aussie accent. There's a couple of people, but I can't remember right now who do it. But like when I hear an American do an Aussie accent, I'm always like, wow, right? But yeah, I mean, but a lot of Australian, like, there's so many Australian actors in America, right? There's so many Aussie actors, like it's who do, and they have to do American accents. So maybe we just have more practice, But yeah, but going back to the thing is, I think that I think the base in years from now will be studied in. It was perfect, usually excited. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That's all I know how to say. Yes, ma'am. It's like that and what else do I say? Yeah, that's about it. That's about it. So yeah, online. I've noticed a great difference between people dropping away from him. Yeah, Dakota. Yeah, there will be a college major and major in the future. By the way, Aussie accents are hard, but I used to do pretty good ones. Oh, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear someone do an Aussie accent. Like, I'll invite you in. If you want to jump in, I'll invite you in. You could do the Aussie accent. Um, but yeah, so I think it's a bit of a weird thing that like Trump must have thought like in 2016 that he was building a cult because that's when he said I could shoot someone on like I think it's 54th Street or something like that. So I think it's like New York or something, and I wouldn't lose a voter. Now he's being like hyperbolic, but there's no doubt that he knew back then that he was building like a cult, right? Like a cult base. And so I think I think the base is moving a little bit. The only people, Fifth Avenue. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Yes, not ma'am. Yes, sir. Fifth Avenue. Yes, yeah, yeah. So yeah, but I think in terms of like his base moving away from him, the only people that polling is showing that is moving away from him is basically young men. Like someone said before, 18 to 29 year olds. He's starting to lose now, and I think that's also part of the reason is because he's lost a lot of the podcasters, right? Joe Rogan's kind of gone. Andrew Schultz, another big podcaster. A lot of the online podcasters are moving away from Trump. Aussie and Irish accents, yeah, yeah. Wait a sec, I've got to read that money one. How do I read? How do I go down here? Aussie and Irish accents hard. British accent I can do pretty well. Yeah, British is pretty easy, I think. Keep up the awareness and keep spreading the truth concept. We can beat this. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, yeah. Top of the morning to you. Top of the morning to you. No, that's really bad Irish. That was really bad Irish. But yeah, my neighbour is actually from Ireland, so I hear his Irish accent all the time. Yeah, he's a really nice guy. Loves to drink, but really nice guy. Bob, I'm blown away that any woman would ever vote for him. I know the smart ones don't. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and like a lot of the young guys, a lot of the vibes are now moving away. Hi BC, nice to see you, BC. Thanks for joining. Yeah, a lot of the vibes are now moving away from Trump, and that's why you're seeing a lot of the younger people also moving away from him. And so I think what it shows is the thing about the 18 to 29-year-old group, a lot of people will say they don't vote in big numbers, which is actually true. 18 to 20-year-olds don't vote in big numbers, but they do vote. And the interesting thing, Lucky Charm, the interesting thing about the 18 to 29-year-olds is they actually have more control than just besides voting. They are the most active online. They are the most likely to have a TikTok account. They're more likely to comment on a TikTok account. They're more likely to share to other people. So they create a lot of the vibes that go on online, right? With TikTok. So even though they vote less, they interact a lot more online. And so they can create an environment where, you know, it can seem like right-wing people are more cool or right-wing people are getting more traction online. And that person might not even go out and vote, right? But they're probably doing by just being online 24/7, commenting and sharing videos and having more online influencers who are right wing. The 18 to 20-year-olds actually have a lot more power than just them voting. So I think a lot of times the Democratic Party only thinks about who is voting for them, right? Yeah, they don't even think about who is voting for them. They don't think about how that party could help because enthusiasm for a party a lot of times comes from young people, right? And so it doesn't matter if they vote or they don't. Obviously, you want them to vote, but they have a lot more influence in 2025 than they did 10, 20 years ago when it was all about mainstream media. I see a lot more young people protest. I did 6 months ago. It's encouraging. Yeah. So I think from that point of view, it's important for Democrats to get them back, right? It's important to get young people back. Now, just because young people are not, they're not liking Trump as much as they did last year, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to become Democrats, right? Whether they become Democrats or not will rely on who the candidate is, right? If it's Chuck Schumer, now I know it's not going to be Chuck Schumer, right? But if it's Chuck Schumer, those young people are not coming to the Democratic Party, right? Whatever you think of Chuck Schumer, they're just not going to go there, right? If it's someone like Zoran Mandami, he has a much higher chance, right? Now, of course, you can also make the argument here that Zoran Mandami, uh, in a country in a federal election, might not be as successful that he is in New York. But what I'm talking about, not necessarily just his policies, but I'm talking about the fact that he talks about cost of living. He's got charisma. You have to have charisma these days. You have to. I mean, look at Michael Bloomberg, right? Michael Bloomberg has millions of dollars and never gets more than 2% of the vote. Why? Because he's boring as batshit, right? You have to have charisma in the age, right, of in 2025. So it's no longer about just how much. Obviously, it's good that a party has money. You have to have money to win, right? But it's not enough to have money, a Democratic Party to have money. They've got to have someone who can communicate and someone who has charisma and knows how to communicate with all age groups, right? Whether they're 18 or 85. They've got to be able to communicate with all those groups, right? And so, again, the Democrats need to be very careful about who they pick at the next election. And I'm not saying it has to be Zoran Mandami, right? Because I have no idea how he would do in in swing states and places like that. And after going under a lot of, because at the moment, right, you have Andrew Cuomo, right? I think Zora definitely has the riz, as the kids say. Yeah, he does. He does have the riz. My only concern with Zoran Mandami is outside of New York, in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, in some of the southern states, swing states, how is he going to do? Right. On the one hand, I can see him doing well, right, with working class people, right? Yeah, authenticity and charisma. Exactly, Marty. He's got that, right? Those are the two things that count now: authenticity, charisma, right? And the other thing is that I don't know how he would do it in those swing states, right? Obviously, if the popular vote came in, like I'm going to be talking on Friday with, it could be a different situation, right? It could be a completely different situation, right? Yeah, don't underestimate. Yeah, Bob, exactly. And it's not just the fact that, and by the way, the older groups are obviously, I'm not saying Zoran's national, but he's good in yeah, exactly, Rob. And that's the thing, like Democrats need to be careful that they don't just go, well, we need Zoran Mandami. What they need is someone who has a lot of the character. Many people that we're going to vote for, Bernie switch to Trump populism. Yeah, yeah. Now, like, the interesting video that I like, what I saw about Zoran Mandami on TikTok, right, was that these are the ones that went viral, is that he went into places in New York that had voted for Donald Trump. Now, these people that voted for Donald Trump that he was talking to, these were not MAGA red, wearing the red hat, showing up at, rallies, and, they weren't that type of people. They were people who were probably, for the most part, apolitical, but they were having problems with cost of living. So when Zoran Mandami talked to them, he talked to them very genuinely, right? And he talked to them with respect, right? Because they weren't full on MAGA people, right? And he said to them, why did you vote for Trump? And they said, well, it wasn't to do with his character. It was to do because he was telling me what I wanted to hear. He was telling them that he's going to bring down rents, then home prices and stuff like that. And these people aren't watching the news every day. They're only watching news on the peripherals. And so they're only hearing small things, right? And they said that they were hearing Democrats talking about Trump being authoritarian, and they were hearing Trump talking about bringing down the cost of living. So you can see in those videos, you can see already how Democrats need to change their thing. It's not that you can't say that Trump is not authoritarian, but at the end of the day, the reality is that people will vote on cost of living over that. It's just reality because there are too many Americans who are not paying attention. So I've said this 100 times before, and since I've been saying it, I have noticed some other people like Harry Sisson, who's an influencer on Substack, and a few other people saying it. I'm not saying I started it, but I have been saying it for a long time, is that housing is absolute, but he's a lie. Yeah. Oh, Alex, I'm not saying what he was saying was true. I'm saying that these people believed what he was saying, or they wanted to believe what he was saying, right? So, obviously he was lying. But what I'm saying is, I don't blame young people being ticked off about not being able to pay homes affordable. Yeah. I'm noticing more in the Democratic Party at the moment saying what I think should have been last year's thing. But I still think they would have lost because of inflation. But you cannot lose. I can't believe how many times I've said this. The Democrats could not lose by doing a massive, massive housing campaign. Building homes is absolutely the best way Democrats can win, right? It brings working class people in because working class people build homes. It will stop extra supply, will stop prices going up, rents going up, that sort of stuff. It employs a lot of people in Rust Belt states, right, in homes, right. It brings young people in because young people are always talking about rents and home prices and stuff like that. And a lot of young people work in the trades, and right. It's a big problem that for the first time ever, young people will make less than their parents. Yeah, a lot of this stuff is also happening in Australia, by the way. I grew up in the 80s, 90s, that period, right? And I was able to go to university. I moved out of home with my girlfriend when I was 18 years of age, right? We bought it, we moved into a unit, we're renting a unit in the inner suburbs of Sydney. So this would be like a trendy inner suburb of New York, right? So not the outskirts, right? And I was going to university, and we both went to uni, and we both had part-time jobs. And we were able to have a decent life. Like, we weren't partying every night, right? But there's no way a young person could do that today. Housing and dark money, politics, universal healthcare. Yeah. A big health thing would also be good. Even if it's like a public option, just to get there, like go public option, and then, so yeah, I do think the housing thing is such a big thing that the Democrats really could do, and do it, because what you're basically saying is, is that generations before, right? I would say, like we said before, our parents, right? Sorry, our kids now cannot live the way we did, or our grandparents did, right? They can't. It's just true. They can't. They, so many. I don't know if this is the thing in America, but there is so many young people still at home at 24, 25, 26, right? Because they can't afford to move out, right? And and their parents are like, because I speak to the parents, and their parents are like, our goal was to get the years ago, right, when the kids were small, was our goal was to get the kids out of home as quickly as possible and then sell the home and go traveling around Europe. So, I know so many parents who now can't do that anymore, right? They can't sell their home. They can't decide to go off Europe because they're still looking after their children and their children in their 20s. And back in my time, I would have been out of home. I would have been self-sufficient, but it's not the kids' fault. It's like just how things are at the moment. So you can see how Zoran Mandami, by saying, do this, do that, is gonna, is gonna appeal to people. And I think rents in Chicago for an apartment are ridiculous, more than my mortgage. Yeah. And look, Bob, in Australia, in Australia at the moment, you're better off in a lot of places getting a mortgage than you are rent. Except they can't get the deposit. You got to pay a deposit to get the thing, and a lot of a lot of the banks won't loan money because you don't have any capital, you don't have any assets at that age, right? And and even though you're paying more rent than you would mortgage, right? They can't get it together. So a lot of parents here in Australia do as well. And obviously, this is the thing: not every kid has parents who can do this. There are kids like my parents, right? My parents didn't have a lot of money, and so I could never have had this option. I was lucky to grow up in a time where it was easier for me to live out of home, get an education, sort of move up the ladder. But had I been born today, had I been a teenager or 20s today with my parents, right, I would have been in big trouble because my parents were renting. They had nothing to pass down to me. Check out Paige Kennedy, current mayor of Sacramento, a true die-in-the-wool populist Democrat. Yeah, okay, yeah, I will. Yeah, so a lot of this stuff is like I watch young people, and then what I actually don't like is that sometimes I will hear people older than me, like people in say their like boomers, 60s, 70s, and that, and I will say to them, it's hard for young people now, right? And these are probably not progressive people, right? They're probably right wing older people, but they will say, oh no, well they're going out too much. They shouldn't eat out at coffee shops anymore. When I bought a home. I never used to go out to restaurants. I just eat at home every day and stuff like that. And it's like when they were growing up, right, you could buy a house for $20,000, right? And even when you look at your salary back then, it's still 20 times harder now for a young person in that. So and they'll go, oh, but the interest rates were much higher. Well, yeah, but the home prices were much lower, right? So, so again, they don't really look at the whole picture. They have this, I think it's like a natural thing for some older people to look at younger people and they just go lazy or, you don't know what I went through and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that every generation has gone through their own thing. I'm Gen X, right? We went through bad stuff as well, right? Really bad stuff. Gen X went through some really bad stuff. I had to hear, right, in 1990s that Kurt Cobain had died, right? Now that I had to go through that, right, as a Gen Xer, and and it was tough. It was tough. It's tough to hear that your hero from Nirvana had died, and then to find out that possibly his girlfriend could, who knows? But anyway, it's just basically like every generation goes through bad bits. I loved him too. Yeah, Kurt Cobain. It was great music. They came to Australia, I think in the early 90s, and I went and saw them. I saw them, and I saw a couple of the old indie bands from America. Yeah, I think it was Smashing Pumpkins or something like that. Yeah, yeah. But anyway, it's basically every generation has its problems, but we're not acknowledging, right? We're not acknowledging that younger people have it tougher because generally speaking, you want the next generation to have it better than you, right? And I want my kids to have a better better lifestyle than me. But I'd also like to go travel. Do you know what I mean? I'd also like to sell my unit, right, and go live in Spain because that's what I love to do. I'd love to go live in Spain for like 2 years. I can't do that, right? And by the time I can do it, I'm probably not going to enjoy it as much. So, so it's not just affecting the young people; it's affecting the parents as well, right? Because they have children at home for way longer than they probably expected it to. So when I see, I own a place, right? I own a place, right? But I'm still paying off my mortgage. I haven't paid off my bank thing yet, yeah. But when I see my price of my place go up and up and up, right? I don't feel great about it, right? I feel bad about it because I know that's going to make it harder for my children to leave home, right? So every time I see the price go up, I just assume my kids are going to be home for another year, right? And I want to go to Spain, so I don't get excited when prices go up, and I think to myself, my children, right? At what stage are my children going to be able to buy a place? They can't even rent a place at the moment, right? It's too hard for them to rent. It's really, really tough for them. And all their friends, they're all living at home with their parents, like all of them in there, So again, it's a tough thing to do. And I really do hope that the Democrats bring in something that helps that generation of people, to get better. How many kids do you have, Joe? I only have one. I have one. Yeah, yeah. I only have one child. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I know. I keep saying kids, but yeah, it's one. I have a dog, right? I have a dog, so who's called Nibbles, which is kind of like it's kind of like a child a little bit. Yeah. Um, Half Chihuahua, half. So it's called. So my dog is a Mauchi, which is half Chihuahua, half Maltese. So it's like a tiny dogs rock. Yeah, yeah, they do. Yeah, yeah. And my dog's name is Nibbles, Nibble, not double P, Les Nibbles. It was named by my child. He was 6 years old at the time. Yeah, because and she saw when our dog Nibbles was a puppy, she saw the dog nibbling, so he said Nibbles was a good name. Yeah. So yeah. How old is your kid, Joe? Oh, Nibbles. How old is your kid, Joe? So are you asking me? Sorry, Rob. Are you asking me how old Nibbles is? Oh, Nibbles is 12 years old. Yeah. So Nibbles is getting on a bit. But the thing about Nibbles is that she is actually she's actually the same as she was when she was like 2 years old. She hasn't shown any signs of aging yet, but because I'm aware she's 12 years old, as soon as she like moves around slowly, I'm like, oh no, it's about to start. But it hasn't happened yet. She jumps around. She's like, she's like, she's like the most perfect dog. Nibbles the Mouchie. Yeah. Well, she has her own Instagram. This is so sad, but she has her own Instagram account called Nibbles the Amazing Mouchie. I'm not. No, I'm just shouting out to Nibbles, but asking how old your mum. Oh, yeah. Well, Nibbles is just on the couch. My child is 18. Yeah, 18. Just so he's in first year of high school, first year of university. Sorry. Yeah, and it's interesting that the first day my child went to, so he's studying exercise physiology, so he's really into fitness. He loves going to the gym. He loves fitness, all that sort of stuff, and he's not a right winger, which is great. So he's like a left wing, like fitness bro, which is great to see. So yeah, but the first day that he went to university to study exercise physiology, there was a young guy handing out Andrew Tate. Can we see Nibbles? Um, Nibbles, Nibbles. She's asleep. She's asleep. Sorry. If she come, Nibbles, come on, Nibbles. Look, come here, Nibbles. Where's Mummy? Where's Grandpa? If you say where's Grandpa, he loves his grandpa. If you say where's Grandpa, you usually like, can you see her? Can you see where's Grandpa? Where's Grandpa? Come here, Nibbles. Where's Grandpa? Nibbles. She won't do it. She won't do it. Nibbles? No. Um, but I'll try. My son is his late semester of college, majoring in exercise science. Oh yeah, excellent. Yeah, well, exercise science is what he's doing. LOL, let Nibbles sleep. Well, that's all she pretty much does. So she could get up a little bit. She could do a little bit of work around the house. You know what I mean? She's got her head up and she's looking around for grandpa, right? Because she loves grandpa. But her head is just covering by the couch. Yeah. We'll let her go. We'll let her go. But yeah, when the first day at school of my son, sorry, university, he came home and he said, I was handed this um thing by a guy at the university at the entrance of the university, and it was Andrew Tate stuff. It was like it was like a pamphlet to join the Andrew Tate University, where he teaches guys how to pick up girls, right? So he's got this, it's like a grift that he has online. I already knew about it, right? And he already knew about it. But he just told me about it. And I was like, where was he? And he was like, oh, he was in an area where only new students were coming in. Maybe he'll get a nibbles. Maybe we'll get a nibbles sighting. You might get a nibbles sighting, but you never know. She can be a little bit like the Loch Ness monster, But yeah, basically he was like came home and he had this pamphlet, basically said, oh, join the Andrew Tate University, right? And on this pamphlet, it was like it's sad, but it was like funny. Man targeting vulnerable young men with that. Yeah. And they where he was standing, Rob, where he was standing was the entrance to to the new students coming in. So he deliberately targeted the 18-year-olds or 19-year-olds who generally are starting university and got them because he thinks the younger they are, the more vulnerable they probably are to this bullshit, right? And therefore he was targeting those particular groups, right? The guy was probably in his 30s. So he was older. He was an older guy, right? But if you looked at him, you would have thought that guy was watching 24/7 Joe Rogan videos. Like he looked like that, right? He looked like that type of guy. But luckily my son is quite savvy with that stuff and stuff like that. And I got to say, all of my son's friends are really into fitness. They do Muay Thai, which is they do boxing. Now, when I say they do boxing, I don't mean they actually do like fighting boxing. It's just like exercise stuff. They do a lot of the exercise Muay Thai, martial arts. Or he's been doing that since he was 8, and all his friends are like that, and none of them are right wing. So there is hope that that they're not just that people who are like that, young men, are not just going to be automatically attracted to the right. But I will say that my son and his friends, what they do have in common is they have very stable homes, right? And they have parents who are generally better educated. And so, for that point of view, it does make sense that his friends group would be more like that, because the people who I know who are really into Andrew Tate almost all come from broken families, right? Most of them come from broken families. That your son sounds like a cool guy. Yeah, he's a cool dude. Yeah, he's a cool dude. Yeah, yeah. And the great thing about my son is he's even though he's young, he loves records. He loves records, right? He will just buy records, right, everywhere. He's got a whole record collection just here. He's got a record player just here, right, where I'm sitting, right? So he's got records. And this, and the other thing is he loves reading books, but he loves reading physical books. He hates Kindles. He hates the Kindles. He goes, I just want physical books. He wants to touch. So he'll go to a bookshop. So this is what I love about my son. He's really into fitness, right? But he's also like a bit of a nerd. Well, it probably depends on their parents, and I bet you're a good dad. Oh, thank you, Rob. I try to be a good dad. I'm definitely not a perfect dad, but I try to be a good dad. But yeah, and so it does show. I do notice that a lot of the Andrew Tate people do come from broken families and all that sort of stuff. So it makes it a bit harder to, for those people to sort of, gravitate towards all that sort of stuff. As where I find the people like my son and his friends, they're also all into similar things. Like they love similar, like fitness, video. Like my son plays video games, not all the time, but he does play video games. Um, and so, broken or authoritarian dictatorial families, yeah, yeah, and like there was a kid at my son's high school only 2 years ago who was like, my son had posted a funny photo of his friend proposing to him. Like my son is straight. It was like a joke. I wish I had records from the 1970s, 80s. Yeah, it was like a joke, right? His friend was proposing to him. It was like a joke because they're like best friends, and everyone's always like joking about it. And he posted it on his Instagram account. And one of the guys at his school is like is a bit rough kid. Was like posting all online saying, "Oh, you're gay. You're a poof. He wasn't saying gay. He was using the other words, right? And he completely went after my son because you just posted this like picture, and this guy was a massive Andrew Tate fan, right? A massive Andrew Tate fan, right? Because I went on his Instagram account, and and so I just thought, oh, okay, like it's just that's the type of people who are following Andrew Tate, right? And that kid is now in jail, right? I think at the age of he'd been to juvie, I think they call it juvie, for a couple of years, and then I think last year at the age of 18 or something like that, he broke into a car, and he's now in jail. I get my 16-year-old niece albums and books, as she's like that too. Yeah, it's so good seeing young people going against the trend, right, mate? Like it's different when I have a record collection. I love books as well, but I'm Gen X, so I come from when I listen to alternative music, like it's kind of like, well, that's my. But when you see it from young people, it's like even cooler. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just because it's so not what they've grown up with or what they've experienced. You know what I mean? It was so much easier. And look, my son also uses TikTok, so like a lot of his friends use TikTok and things like that, but they don't overdo it. I love it that it all came back to vinyl for the win in the end. Yeah. But vinyl records in Australia are super expensive, right? So, like this particular, like this album here, right? This one here that I bought my son. He's like an Aussie. This guy's like an Aussie musician. He does like he kind of does a fusion of jazz, rap, right? So it's kind of like a fusion and pop. So he does like fusion music. This guy, and he actually went and saw it. Like this guy isn't massive, but he's quite well liked within a niche type of young men in Australia, like young guys and girls. And that cost him like $60. Like, so, it's very, very expensive to to buy records. So what I encourage him to do is to go, to, garage sales and find older people who had the originals. But the problem with that is they won't have the same records that he wants because a lot of the music that he likes is actually modern music, but he likes to hear it on record. So you can't really get that from, someone who's in their 70s or 80s who had old records. So yeah, interesting. But yeah, I think it is interesting that I think that a lot of young people are not as right wing as a lot of people try to make him out to be, and I think they're more malleable than most people. And I'm also I've said this before. I'm also more forgiving of young people, right? What I mean by that is if young people say or do stupid stuff, you create him. Yes, that's right. Yeah, Kimmy. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, if young people do and say stupid stuff, I never think, oh well, that person's gone forever, right? Because young people do say and do stupid stuff, and the difference is that when I said stupid stuff when I was their age, there wasn't social media there to to capture that for the rest of my life. So when I see one of my sons, even that guy who went to school and ended up in jail, I'd like to think that in 10 years' time he's a different person, right? No matter what he said to my son, or I'd like to see that. And if he was a different person in 10 years, I'd like to think my son would go, yeah, don't worry about it, dude. You were going through some stuff, and yeah, I think we should be on the left. And I'm saying everyone more forgiving of young people for flirting with MAGA or doing that because they're just young people just do stupid stuff. Yeah, and when you grow up in a family, that's you only know one thing, right? It's very hard to fight against that. until maybe you get older and you get wiser, right? So, I have made it my little bit of a thing is to try to bring young people back. I miss my records and record players too. Well, you know, you know, yeah, there is so many records in my home. We have records everywhere in my home. Yeah, yeah, and books. But I got to be honest, I like records. I actually don't mind a Kindle sometimes as well. But I prefer books. But I will read something on a Kindle. And the reason I like a Kindle is because if you hear like 11 o'clock at night and you hear something about a good book, you can just download and start reading it. As well with the book, you've kind of got to like it's like you don't have access to it straight away. Um, but yeah, so I think basically I'd like who is this artist? His name is okay. So his band is called Fast Friends, and his album. So it's got the A side, B side. Yeah, so it's called Fast Friends. I don't know what his name is. It doesn't say on the actual record. Yeah, but it's called his band is called Fast Friends. Yeah, he's only like I think he's like 19, 20 years old. Yeah, it's expensive. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very expensive. Yeah, yeah. It's a ripoff. Um, so yeah, so I think from that point of view, I'd like the Democratic Party to be more attractive for young men to join, and for that to happen, we need to be more forgiving and if they say stupid stuff or they make edgy jokes or we just got to. I just to me, I just let it go. From that point of view, because I'd love to see the Democratic Party become the party of the cool party again. You know what I mean? The party of that the cool people want to go and join, right? And I think it is the cool party. And I think it's hard to be that when you have an opposition like Trump who just wants to destroy all norms. So that kind of forces the Democrats to be more establishment that you want to be because you're trying to fight someone who's been so extreme. You know what I mean? So it makes it much harder for Democrats to do that. But yeah, it now just let me know. My screen is freezing right now. Is it? Can you just let me know in the chat? Am I freezing, or can you actually hear me talking unfrozen? I think I might be freezing. I think I'm frozen. And the chat seems to be frozen. No, you can hear me? You can? Okay. Yeah. I'll keep going. I think it has frozen a bit. I don't know if it's my internet or not. It always seems to happen. The longer I do a Substack live, the more it seems to look like it's freezing. But yeah, I don't think it is. I think it's just freezing my end, but it's actually not freezing your end because I'm getting love hearts. But I don't know if those love hearts came from like 10 minutes ago or they're coming from now. Um, but yeah, look, and So the other thing that I wanted to talk about today was the Taylor Lorenz story. I don't know if any people read the Taylor Lorenz article about Chorus. Um, so basically, what it was, if you haven't heard it, the Taylor Lorenz story, is she wrote an article. She's like a progressive who wrote an article on behalf of Wired, the magazine, and basically she found that there was dark money, right? That was given to Chorus, and Chorus is basically young people are drawn to charisma and still try to figure it out who they are not and what they believe. I'm 59, but I remember. Yeah, good on you, Rob. Yeah, yeah, exactly, Rob. Yeah, and we have to remember that a lot of us as teenagers or in our 20s are not the same as we are now. You know what I mean? We're not the same people, right? And so that's why, that's why I always like to think when I hear a young stupid person say something, right? I always like to think, oh, what was I saying at that age? I mean, a lot of times I can't even remember what I said at that age, but I'm sure I wasn't saying everything that was like super politically correct when I was like 18, 17, growing up you know, um, you know, growing up in the inner cities of Sydney. I definitely wasn't, And I grew up in an area that was kind of like a weird area. It was like bohemian, right? It was like alternative, but it was also had a bit of a rough element. So it was like a combination of bohemian but rough. You know what I mean? But again, young people, I think, but yet the Taylor Lorenz thing, I lost train of thought. The Taylor Lorenz thing is basically they're trying to, she's exposing the fact, right? Fast brands, yeah. They're exposing the fact that people like David Pakman and a couple of other content creators were receiving money, and who were receiving money was a lot of influencers online, and they were a lot of TikTokers and things like that. And so Chorus, this company that was set up by Brian Taylor. I think his name's what's his name? I can't remember his name. Brian Taylor is an influencer. He's got a big account, but I actually don't watch him that much. I watch probably a little bit of David Pakman. Anyway, the story breaking is basically that there was dark money coming, right, that was going into Chorus, right, and Chorus was paying these influencers, right, and they weren't being transparent about it, right. The dark money was coming from this organization that was run by like billionaires, right. Now, on the one hand, right, the reason I wanted to talk about it is because I kind of have a bit of a nuanced take on this, right, is that, yeah, dark money is a bad thing, right? We should know where people are getting their money, right? I definitely agree with that, right? Now, on the other hand, right, there is no evidence that any of these influencers even knew much about where the money was coming from. So they were basically setting it up as a training program for influencers, right? To show them how to use TikTok or, stream their services, all that sort of stuff, right? So how to use it, how to grow their audience, right? But they also, but there's no evidence that they were being told by the Democratic Party what to say or what not to say. There's no evidence of that whatsoever, right? And Taylor Lorenz is not saying that, right? But a lot of other people took her story and then took it one step further and said that these influencers were being told what to say by the Democratic Party. That's actually not true, right? Or that they were told not to talk about Israel or Gaza. Again, no evidence that's true or not, right? So there's been a lot of bullshit around this story, right? And so on the one hand, I think, okay, we should be more transparent with dark money. But on the other hand, you have MAGA, you have online influencers who are way better at this than Democrats are. So for people to start an organization that helps young, like left-wing, right, influencers, I don't think is a bad thing, right? I totally agree, Joe. Wait a sec. Wait a sec. Yeah, it's not frozen. Okay. It's not frozen. Okay, cool. All right, cool. I see and hear you fine. Okay, cool. Now, just so you know, the chat saying I see you fine. I just got that now. So I'm assuming that you probably sent that like 3 or 4 minutes ago, right? So I think the chat is coming to me like later than you're sending it, right? So if I'm not replying to your chat, it's because I'm not getting it straight away. So I think I'm getting your chat. So yeah, I'm going to have to do something about my internet. I do have fast internet, so it's weird that it does that. And it always seems to do it like when I first start my Substack live, it's fine, and then as it goes along, it seems to get like clunkier as it goes. But anyway, so I don't even know if you guys are interested in this Taylor Lorenz story, but I can hear you, not frozen my end. Okay, cool. So I'm going to continue going with the Taylor Lorenz because I actually think it's an interesting story, and for a couple of reasons, right? Degrades over time. Yeah. Hearts are happening. Yeah, cool. Thank you. Yeah, it does degrade over time. It's weird. I'm going to have to look into that. So maybe a new phone. But the point of the Taylor Lorenz chorus controversy with dark money and influencers is I don't think there's a problem with an organization setting it up and paying some influencers money, right, so they can spend more time like talking about left-wing issues, as long as they're not being told what to do, as long as there's no actual things they can not talk about or can talk about, right? As long as there's no actual direction from anybody, right? Because some of these influencers are getting like $250 a month, right? So, some of them were getting as much as 2,000 a week. So some of them are getting a decent amount of money. Some are getting really low. So the idea that the one on $250 a month, some TikToker, right, who's probably got a couple of thousand views, is that somehow they're compromised by this, I don't think is right. I don't think that 18-year-old TikToker is getting $250 a month even read the contract, right? Probably, who reads contracts like 100 pages long? So I think the story has been overblown a bit, right? And I think there's nuance to the story, and we have to understand that the MAGA media, with things like Charlie Kirk's Turning Point and all that stuff, they are killing the left, right? In the online space, they are killing the left, right? And so, and I will also say this, that yes, dark money is a problem, but you know what I think is a worse problem in the online space? Because there is no evidence that the people who took this money, these influencers, right, changed Substack Live more glitchy than YouTube. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, so maybe it's not just a Joe Thomas thing. Maybe it's maybe it's everybody who, maybe all Substack, when everyone does Substack Live, it seems to get more glitchy. I don't know. But I'm going to look into it. Yeah. But yeah, so maybe I can join Chorus, and then they can pay me, and then they can help with my technical stuff. I mean, think about that. Would they accept an Aussie? I don't know. I don't think they would. But yeah. So I think this dark money thing is an issue, but I think there's a bigger issue in the online space, and I think the biggest issue with content creators is audience capture. And audience capture is the thing that actually changes someone who does content on Substack or YouTube or podcasting, can actually change your actual views, right? Because a lot of stuff with this dark money stuff that you're seeing with Chorus, right? There's no, these influencers didn't change their views. It's not like they were saying one thing beforehand and then said something separately afterward. From what I'm seeing, they just continued doing the same thing they were doing before they received the money, right? And so where I do see content creators actually changing what they say and being corrupted by is audience capture. For most people know audience capture, but it is shocking to me that almost very few people talk about it, or talk about it very, very lightly, right? Considering how what it does compared to, say, dark money. I want to give you an example. So audience capture is where you rely. So I want to say something. There are channels like Breaking Point with Crystal and Saga. I don't know if people watch it or not. And other people like that who will say, we don't take advertiser money and we don't take money from anybody, right? We don't take money. We only take, the only people who pay us are subscribers. Now, it sounds on the surface like that is actually a good thing, right? They're only taking money from their subscribers. But in practice, it actually is probably the worst thing to some degree, right? Because if you're an influencer who's taking money from, I don't know, like a betting company, like a betting company. Like a lot of times these people are like, they're getting money from a betting company, or I don't know, something like, like something that like a middle type business. Not like, I'm not talking about big pharma, like it's a middle business, a business that most people haven't heard of, right? Then they have subscribers, right? Then they might have advertising from YouTube, right? So they have all these different areas of getting money in, right? If they were to do a video, right, and in that video they say something that pisses off their subscribers, right? What happens is their subscribers will go, I hate what you just said. I'm unsubscribing. I'm not paying any anymore. And what happens is those people are then captured. This is what audience capture is, right? They are now captured by the audience because they're relying just on their audience for their livelihood. And so now they can only tell their audience what they want to hear, and they're constantly worried about I don't want to piss off my audience. So what happens is you start saying things, you start obsessing about you don't want to piss off your audience. So you start just feeding your audience what they want to hear. Influencers are not as good as journalists. Brian Taylor Cohen. Yes, Brian Taylor Cohen. Thank you, T. I bet you wrote that like 10 minutes ago. Chorus is good. ACO's chorus. It's not dark money. Yeah. So again, Kimmy, like it's this thing is the focus on dark money. Now, again, transparency is good, but actual practice, it's actually audience capture, which is the one that's actually making things. I want to give you an example of audience capture, right? I don't know how many people know Jimmy Dore, right? Jimmy Dore is a YouTuber who used to be a comedian, but a very, very unfunny comedian. He's also friends, right? He's also friends, more like money. Yeah. He's also friends with Joe Rogan. In 2021, right, when the whole COVID thing was happening, Jimmy Dore, who used to claim to be a Bernie bro, he was always a Bernie bro, right? And he would do all these purity tests on healthcare for all. If you weren't for healthcare for all, you're not a lefty, right? He used to do all that stuff, right? So in 2021, right, he did a pro-vax video. He did a pro-COVID vax video, right? And because he cultivated an anti-establishment audience, right? And he didn't criticize MAGA very much. He spent most of his time criticizing the left, right? And barely touched MAGA. But he still tried to pretend like he was from the left, right? But really, he was gravitating towards MAGA without actually saying it. And the way they do that is not by coming out and saying, we love MAGA. They come out and criticize the Democrats more than the Democrats the MAGA, right? And that's when you start seeing audience capture. That's when you start seeing what's going on. And and what happened with Jimmy Dore is he did a pro-vax video, right? And his audience turned on him in droves. They unsubscribed in massive numbers, right? So what did he do? Now, what did he do? This is audience capture at its worst, right? Way worse than dark money, right? Because what happened here is within 7 days, he did an anti-vax video to get that 7 days. So he went from pro-vaccine to anti-vax in 7 days, right? And I'm sure it had nothing to do with his audience leaving him, right? And then suddenly he came out and he said, I was wrong. I shouldn't have said that. He did like an apology video. I've since looked into it more and realized that the vaccine is in fact dangerous, and bang, bang, bang. And suddenly his subscribers came back. Now, not only did his subscribers come back, they went through the roof, way more than he had before, right? And then he started going towards MAGA more and more and more. He was gravitating towards, right? That's audience capture. That you can't. Your chat is definitely, your chat is definitely behind, Joe. About 2 minutes or so. Okay, thanks, Rob. So if I'm saying stuff so I just got from Rob, your chat is definitely behind. So definitely behind. So if I'm saying stuff, if you're saying stuff to me about chorus and stuff, and I'm not replying because I'm not seeing it, I'm seeing love hearts, but those love hearts could have been from 10 minutes ago. So I'll just keep going. But yeah, so Jimmy Dore is the perfect example of how audience capture does people. I want to give you another example. Dave Rubin, right? Dave Rubin was part of TYT, right? And what happened is that he realized that he could get more subscribers if he became, right? He realized that when he was at TYT, they would criticize the Democrats, and they realized they would get more views when they did criticize the Democrats than they did the Republicans, right? So what did they do? They started. He realized in the chorus. Perfect. Yeah, he realized that he could get more views by being anti-Democrats than he could by being anti-Republican or anti-MAGA, right? So he also did the grift to the right, and they all do the whole thing. They all do the story. They go, why the left? Why I left the left? They all do the story. Why I left the left, and they go on to say, it was because of woke culture, and Democrats were overextending and all that sort of stuff, right? So it's just bullshit, right? So he did it. Tim Pool is another person who did it, who went from being left and then being right. There's a whole list of people in the YouTube world who were captured by their audience, right? They started criticizing Democrats. And so when you start criticizing Democrats on a regular basis, you bring in MAGA, because there's nothing MAGA love more than a left-wing person who criticizes their own, right? Because they love that, right? And also for people on the left who might have voted for, I'm talking about Joe Rogan type people who might have been lefties in the old days, like Joe Rogan was, right? And then made the transition across to MAGA. Having people in the media, online media, say, hey, I'm doing the same thing, and it's not your fault. It's that the left has left us. It's no longer the left that we knew, right? So they have all these ways of justifying going for it. Now, again, I'm not saying that people can't change their minds, and people can change their minds legitimately, right? But what I'm saying is that if you look at the Cora story, right, and you look at the fact that none of those influencers changed their minds at all, not one of them, right, at all. None of the influencers were ever told what to say and what not to say. Not one of them. Taylor Lorenz agrees with that. But what happened is that people like Crystal Ball at WingBet and other people, or Hassan Piker, right, they took they took her story and they added steroids to it. And they said, well, it's because, they didn't because they wouldn't criticize Israel, right? Again, there's no evidence of any of that. So this idea, right? So they put it in, they turned it into something that Taylor Lorenz wasn't saying, right? So Taylor, in my opinion, Taylor Lorenz should come out and say, because she's friends with these people and knows, and call them out for being disingenuous about her story, right? Secondly, it's obvious that the story, I think, was done because Taylor Lorenz is more of a progressive, and a lot of the influencers like David Packman, Brian Taylor, all that are more, I would call, centre left, right? And I think if these people were more progressive, the influencers, she would never have written that story. But that doesn't mean she shouldn't write that story. There's nothing wrong with her writing that story. What I'm saying is that dark money coming, right? Be transparent. That is not the major problem. Online influencers like Taylor Lorenz need to start talking about audience capture, because that's the big issue, right? Audience capture is the big issue, right? It's not dark money where people aren't being instructed on what to say. Now, if you're getting dark money and you're being told what to say, that's different, right? But that's not what we're talking about here, right? There was no instructions given, right? But if we're talking about dark money that goes to chorus, like dark money, then it goes to chorus, and then it goes to the influencer, and the influencer doesn't know, right, or where it's coming from, or whether it's dark money or not, and they're not being instructed to say or not say anything, then the damage is not as bad as a online influencer, right, who is worried about talking about something or worried about not talking about something because they're going to lose their audience. So, yeah, again, that's just my opinion. Like, I can't get any of the chat. I mean, yeah. So I think something that the left should be talking about more, and the right, to be honest, because also the right also falls prey to audience capture a lot. It's just that I think it happened more on the left because it was more rewarding financially to go from the left to the right, and it's less rewarding financially to go from the right and the left because the online space is mostly for the right. So, so that's why I think it was happening more the other way around. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm going to stop here because it's like completely frozen now. Like I can't even I'm just frozen like completely. So I'm not getting any of the messages coming through. So, but I will do another. I'll see you. Like hopefully, all the people on here will come back on Friday, 10 a.m. EST time, which is I think your time, and join the conversation I have about the national popular vote with the Democrat strategists and the Republican strategists about changing the electoral college vote. It's not just you. I've seen other subsects with the same problems at times. Okay, cool. Thanks, Marnie. Yeah, thanks, Marnie, for that. But I bet you, Marnie, you wrote that. You just wrote that probably 5 minutes ago. So, Judy, thank you for joining. You've probably been listening to me for 4 minutes, but I'm about to go. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to my Substack Live. Again, please come to it on Friday when I talk to these people. And I might even ask them about because they're strategists. specifically the Democrat one. I might even ask at the end, like, what's her opinion on how the 2024 election went? What the Democrats could have done better. But yeah, we'll see. But yeah, jump in on the call, and you can ask questions as well. Thank you so much, guys. See you soon.